you guys, so I know it's been a little bit since I've been on. The family and I, we've just been adjusting to getting settled into our new place. And I know I didn't get a chance to update you on exactly how the Lord moved on our behalf. So let's get into that now. So, of course, when our story aired on the news, we gained a ton of support from people far and wide, including those from the media outlet who shared the story. They ended up speaking on our behalf to the property manager to invoke a sense of urgency on the situation. Now, this actually got the property manager to move a little bit. However, they tried to put a Band-Aid on an open gash by sprinkling in new appliances, and we told them absolutely not. This is not acceptable. You guys are going to have to do more than that. But here's where it gets interesting. So after the story aired on the news, my ex-husband ended up finding out where we lived and began to harass us. Now, I'm unsure if I've ever shared the testimony of that situation. If I did, then great. If not, I'm gonna have to do a separate video on that later. But just as a long story short, I was in an abusive marriage for 12 years in which I almost did not leave with my life. That resulted in me having to get an indefinite restraining order against my ex. So it's pretty much until death, right? Until one of us dies or I lift it, which I will not. So in those legal proceedings, I made sure that I set it up to where he did not have access to where we lived when I moved here. And so he was not supposed to know where we lived at all. So he watched the story that aired, zoomed in on the apartment number, and began to use my information in order to try to harass and intimidate me. He sent the police to my house in order to do a wellness check on kids he hasn't talked to in over a year. He even called my property manager's front office and left voicemails in an attempt to harass and intimidate me. But he didn't even realize that by him doing all of this, this is what actually gave us favor. So because I am a survivor of domestic violence, there's actually a clause in my lease that specifies if the aggressor ends up discovering where I live, if he begins to harass and call and do all of these different things, that it is the property manager's responsibility in order to find us a new and safer home. Once they got that voicemail from him, within 24 hours, they began to start the process in order to secure new housing for us. And within 3 days, I was signing my lease for us to be able to move into our place by that Saturday. But this isn't even the wildest part of this. The biggest thing is the revelation that the Lord shared with me as I was going through all of this. And it was God beginning to show me that this was Him delivering me and rescuing me from out of my exodus. And I'll explain. Because God is such a merciful, loving, and gracious Father, oftentimes He will allow certain situations to touch us in order to reveal exactly what He's placed inside of us and to show us who He's created us to be. If you look throughout the Bible, you will see that the Lord often moves in patterns. So whenever the Lord desires to expand us in our responsibility, in our capacity, in our blessings, right? There are certain things that we have to go through in order to prove that we are capable of stewarding everything that He has for us. To whom much is given, much is required, right? So biblically, even when you look at Moses, as he was rescuing them from out of Egypt, there were many things that Moses had to be tested on in order for him to come into his promised land. One of those things was him coming into an understanding of every gift and grace that God had given him. Because if you remember, when the Lord called him and desired to raise him up, he didn't believe that he was capable of delivering the Israelites. But through his submission, surrender, and obedience to God, the Lord began to show up significantly on his behalf. But as you continue through the scriptures and you get up to the part where they're getting ready to cross the Red Sea, this is the significant part of this story that resonated with me. In Exodus 14, you'll see where after they were delivered from out of Egypt, the Egyptians began to close in on them, right? Pharaoh sent all of the soldiers in order to go and capture them again. And so Moses and the Israelites are coming up to the Red Sea and they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? So you can only imagine the level of pressure that Moses was feeling in that very moment, right? You got hundreds of soldiers on horses and chariots. You got the Israelites over here mad. They were probably cussing him out, all kinds of things. And so Moses had to reassure them that, hey, the Egyptians that you see now, very soon you won't have to deal with them. And although the Bible doesn't say specifically what Moses said to God, you can tell that there was some type of dialogue between him, because immediately after, you'll see where God began to respond to Moses and say, hey, why are you crying out to me? Pick up your staff. And I remember the first time I read that scripture, I was like, man, that's messed up. And so I oftentimes laugh at it, not because the situation was funny, but because that is a typical response of a parent whenever a child is overreacting in a matter. So here you have Moses in a predicament that seems virtually impossible to get out of, and he's panicking, right? But here on the other half, you have God that's like, hey, this is light work. Do you not remember the God that you serve? And so that was literally the Lord with me in this entire ordeal. Oftentimes, we will sit around as believers waiting for God to move on our behalf when the Lord has already given us the power and authority to be able to address these situations ourselves. And that's exactly what the Lord had to show me, right? It was him telling me, hey, you are my daughter, right? Do you not know that you have royalty in your bloodline? And so it was him beginning to teach me how to properly exercise other tools and weapons when it comes to spiritual warfare, and showing me the importance of decreeing and declaring and casting down, right? Coming against principalities and high powers. And as I began to do these things, I immediately saw a shift within my situation in a matter of days. Luke 10:19 tells us that God has given us power and authority to trample over serpents and scorpions and all works of the devil. Not some, but all of them. But this is why renewing our mind is so important, because the enemy will make us seem or make us believe that we are totally helpless and that he is more powerful than the God that we serve. And this is absolutely not true. The word declares that Satan is underneath our feet and that he is already defeated, right? That is exactly what Jesus went to the cross for. And this is why we must begin to speak from a place of past tense and knowing that it is already done. So I encourage anyone who is listening to this, no matter what situation or circumstance you're in, even if it seems like there's no way out, I want you to begin to thank the Lord in advance for what he's getting ready to do. Start thanking him as if it's already done. This is exactly why the Bible tells us that let the poor say that I am rich, right? We have to begin to pray and speak and declare from a place of victory and not defeat. Do not speak word curses over your situation, and increase your faith in knowing that the Lord is on your side. Blessings to you all.